Welcome back to Student Teaching Students. We are Javier and Jesus.
If you're just joining us, Student Teaching Student is a podcast designed to help you learn things in English. We already have another podcast before this one speaking about modals, and this is the second one in a trilogy.
Now, to have a quick review of the past explanation we made on modal verbs, well, modal verbs are auxiliary verbs that we can use to express different things or functions, as it will be to express an ability, express certainty, probability or possibility, to express obligation, to make requests, or to give advice. Well, as we mentioned at the end of the last podcast, this one will focus on the actual uses of modal verbs. We will be covering some of them on this one and the rest on the last one. Now, Javier, what can you tell us about the first function of the modal verbs?
Well, Jesus, the first function we're going to see in this podcast is the ability. The modal verbs of ability show you just that, ability. What a revelation. Ability can be expressed in the past, present, or future. It can be an ability that was used over and over again, or something that was done just once, on a special or rare occasion. The modal verbs of ability are can, could, and be able to.
That sounds about right. Now, if only I had done something in my life that is worth telling.
Sad story. Well, if you have done something in your life worth telling, these are the type of modal verbs you can use. For example,
Well, can is used to talk about ability, like in present and future. Like, for instance, if you say he can read well, or he can play the guitar really well.
could is used to talk about the ability in the past. He could read well when he was younger. He could sing better when he was younger.
And able to is used to talk about certain or particular abilities. Like he was able to read when he was 4 years old. Like quite a feat if you think about it.
Exactly.
Well, we could only hope to be so smart as to be able to read at 4 years olds. Okay, moving on. The next type of model we will talk about is models of certainty, which basically tell you how certain you are about things.
Too bad I'm not certain about anything. I always make big mistakes because I can't choose correctly.
Yeah, well, that's life for you. Well, to express certainty in the present, we use must, can't, and couldn't. To express certainty in the past, we use must have, can't have, and couldn't have.
For examples, I can't find my keys. They must be somewhere because I used them to open the front door. As you can see in this example, we use a can't to say that we can't find the keys.
The next example says, they can't be outside because I came inside immediately. That's the same as to say that it's not possible that they are outside.
And finally, I must have put them back in my handbag. Oh yes, there they are.
Here, the person is making an accurate assumption as to where the keys are. Like, the person is pretty sure the keys will be in there.
What you have to remember about these types of modal verbs is that depending on how certain you are about something is the one you're going to use. The more sure you are, the more closer you're going to want to be to using must.
Which is always or almost always 100%
Yeah,
sure.
we're talking about 95 to 100. And if you're not that sure, you can use can't. The function we're talking about now is probability. Now, probability is just how likely something's going to happen and allows you to predict what it is. To,
Well, to talk about probability in the present or future, we use should and ought to.
as an example, you should be better soon if you take the medicine. Here we're saying there's a probability that the person will get better.
So,
But then again, there's a probability that they'll get even more sick.
and only so long they actually take the medicine. The next example is you ought to recover quickly if you follow the doctor's orders. In here, you're implying that you should recover quickly if you do as you're told and follow the doctor's order. If you don't, then you probably won't recover that fast.
To talk about it in the past, we use should have and ought to have. For example, my rash should have gone by now. I have been using this cream exactly as the doctor told me. Here, like we said, we're talking about probability. Now, what we said is that the rash should have gone, but it hasn't, because even though we've done what the doctor has told us, it hasn't happened.
Because of probability. The next example is I ought to have had a lower fever by now. I have been taking medication. In here, we can find a likely scenario when the fever is probably not lowering, it's probably the same, even though it shouldn't be the same because the person is taking medicines. But then again, as everything is in probability, we can't be that sure of the outcome.
Like with the previous function, you also want to choose different modal depending on just how certain or just how likely it's going to happen. You usually use should as the least and ought to as the most. Well, the next modal verb allows us to predict the future.
Or at least have a pretty good guess as to what will happen.
Possibility. We use could, may, and might to talk about the possibility of something either in the present or in the future. For example, I think you should go back to the doctor. The rash could,
May.
might get even worse, and you might have a scar. As we said, there's something that could happen. Doesn't mean that's going to happen. It's something that could happen, a possibility.
Now, we use could have and might have plus past participle to talk about the possibility in the past. I could
Might have.
died if I hadn't gone to the hospital when I did. Now, here we're guessing that if we didn't do a certain thing, the outcome could have been something different than what actually happened. In this particular example, the person is saying that he could have died if he didn't go to the hospital, but he wasn't sure about it. And that will be the last function we will be covering in this podcast. Now, we have a little activity for you to practice. This activity isn't that difficult. You just have to go to a link which will be provided in the description of this podcast and answer the exercise in the web page. You will fill the blanks with the appropriate modal verb, and then you will check your answer and see how many mistakes you actually have.
Well, now you can pause the video.
Well, I hope you did well on the exercise. Hope you didn't have many mistakes. Well,
And like we said, remember, even if you had a few mistakes, just review them and we'll continue to talk about these.
you will get better with time. Now, to help you with this review, we like to guide you to a site that we consider is pretty useful. It has grammar notes on what we have been covering, and also it has a lot of exercises for you to practice if you feel like it.
It's a very nice page. The link in the description, and I'm pretty sure you will like it a lot. Just remember, we're the ones who told you to go there first. So continue to watch this podcast. Don't just
Well,
leave us behind.
well, I think that's it for this podcast. We'll be covering the rest of the functions on model pairs on the last one. Anything you want to add?
I guess that'll be all. So, thank you for listening to Students Teaching Students podcast. I hope you have a lovely morning,
Evening
or
or
afternoon.
yeah. And hope to see you next time.
Remember to like and subscribe.